Welcome to my budget deck channel where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you'd be interested in, then why not subscribe? Let's talk about Dogmatika, a deck that has been somewhat requested and that has given me the necessary motivation to look into this deck for real this time and not just alibi-wise by myself. And I have come up with a list that is fairly playable. It's obviously not as good as some of the more competitive variants around. This one focuses more on some of the ritual monsters, but the problem is you don't run that many of them, and there are some neat little things in here that you can or don't have to use depending on what you want to be up to. And also I have this whole section on the right hand side, which I will constantly jump in between to tell you what other cards you could be running, what other cards make sense, and what cards you could be trying out but might not be that great. So let's go by the card by card. We have Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, we have Nibiru, and we have Infinite Impermanence, the cards that include in any kind of deck that tries to achieve some stuff or needs some extra boost for going second, because these you do get at one-offs in the Master Pack bundles, and that is a very, very good way to, well, spend your gems most of the time, especially if you are new to the game. We have Impcantation Penciplume, we have Impcantation Candoll, we have Bookstone, and we have Talismandra. Add one in here. Weird ratios, I know. Now the thing is, you would need any of these effects at one point, and since you can special them out from your deck, it makes sense to run that ratio. It sounds really bad, but it does work out that way because you've run multiple of them, then you're kind of screwed, and you have a way to tucking them back into your deck, so that's also not too bad. And it's fairly good variant of tucking them back into the deck because you have access to that quite a lot, and I'll be talking about that in a second. But yeah, I feel like this tiny engine can help you setting up your ritual plays a lot more consistent because you don't run certain other cards that would be good for consistency. You can also run double pre-preparation of rites because this card is a lot better than this package. You would have to run 2 of this and then probably 2 of this one. You can already see that would be 3 extra super rares, so I'm trying to cut down on that. But since this card mentions both of these ritual monsters in its card's text, you can't search them. It mentions it differently than some other ritual spells might, but it doesn't matter because this only says you have to mention it on that ritual spell, and that is the case. So if you run 2 of this, maybe cut 1 of them then, and then you can search them a bit easier, so you don't need to resort to running any of this. But like I said, 3 super rares that like this you do not have to run. Obviously, you have less slots in your deck for good stuff. Now, triple Manju of the 10,000 hands. This is basically in here for Diviner of the Herald, because Diviner of the Herald usually a card you would want to be playing because you can send Herald of the Arclight to the graveyard, but Herald of the Arclight also not in this deck, so you have to make do with what is available, and this would be 3 extra ultras and 1 extra super rare that we can save by running Manju of the 10,000 hands. Not as good, but since you don't have that many good normal summons, well, I mean, you do have some, obviously, that can be very helpful to search you whatever card you need. We have Ecclesia, also a card that can search you the ritual spells and the ritual monsters in here. But this card does so much more. It cannot be destroyed by monsters by battle that are special summoned from the extra deck, so that can stall you some games from time to time, especially if your opponent doesn't read, so that is quite interesting. And it can search you things, and you can special summon this card from your deck in certain scenarios. So all in all, definitely a 3 of. Now we come to a small engine that I put in here that is mainly for budget reasons, but also because it does some stuff, and that is Springans Kitt plus the card Light of the Branded. Springans Kitt can search this and then tuck a card in your hand back into the deck, can help you to get rid of certain incantations that you maybe want back in your deck or that you don't need anymore, because you do run certain like brick-ish cards that you would want to get back. And then you can run Light of the Branded, which target 1 fusion monster on the field or in either graveyard, return it to the extra deck, and the rest of the effect already doesn't matter, unless you play a variant that also runs the Albaz card, which is quite, you can easily run it in this deck. You can splash in 1 Fallen of Albaz and have access to a whole fusion pool as well, but I'll be talking about this once we get to the extra deck. But the important thing about this is not only is it removal for fusion monsters, it can also shuffle cards like Ntis and cards like Titaniclad back into your deck, which is very, very important in a budget version, because then you don't need to run multiple of this, but you can get away with just running 1 of it and use the searches anyway, because you can summon Springans Kitt if the Iron Dash Dragon is sent to the graveyard. So there's that, and this will be happening from time to time, so you can use this combo kind of on command a little bit, because sending cards from the extra deck to the graveyard is kind of the flow of this deck, so this comes up more often than you might think. We have Dogmatika Fleurdelis in here because this card is a one-off searchable card that can be used during your opponent's turn if you have it in your hand to stop some of your opponent's extra deck plays. So a very, very neat card. You have two ways of searching this card, once with your Ecclesia and also one with your extra deck monster if it's sent to the graveyard. So this card very, very strong at 1. Then I decided to run a Dogmatika Ashiyan, whatever you want to call it. The one that is in here for Maximus, because I felt like Maximus as a super rare would make the deck a bit more expensive for the fact that you don't run a good lineup of cards for your extra deck to send to the graveyard anyway. And when if you could choose the cards your opponent sends, this card would still be very playable in this deck. For the fact though that you can't and your opponent chooses them, it doesn't really do that much for the strategy of destroying your opponent's extra deck. And it doesn't really do that much for you as well, because you don't have all the good stuff cards that you should be having in a Dogmatika deck, in your extra deck, that you can send to the graveyard. So yeah, bit problematic from time to time, but yeah, here we are. It is what it is. So we replace it with this card that has, I want to say decent attack stats, but that's not true for a level 8 monster. But this one can be very interesting because when you special summon it from the hand, you can target one Dogmatika card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. This is how you recycle your ritual monsters or your ritual spells, for example. And when an opponent monster declares an attack, you can make all Dogmatika monsters you currently control gain 5 for attack. So this is basically the counterpart of letting your monsters gain attack from Fleurdelis. So sometimes this can be coming in handy because your Dogmatika monsters lack one very specific thing, and that is attack power from time to time. So not too bad of an effect as well. It's not the best card, but it can get you certain cards back that you might need to put another body on board. Is a level 8 monster, so can come in handy for one of your ritual monsters. It's okay, it's decent, it's not good, but for a budget version, it does its job. Then we have a white Relic of Dogmatika, a card I thought about cutting, and you could cut if you would want to, because this card becomes mainly good because you can send Herald of the Arclight to the graveyard and then sub the double play. But since we don't run Herald because it is quite expensive and we already are at lots of super rares, it isn't as good anymore. It can still help you with the strategy of destroying your opponent's extra deck, which is nice. It can help you boost the attack points of the other ritual monster, which is nice. And in theory, you could run one Dogmatika Albazoa as well, because this card is semi-decent, especially during your turn. It can protect your monsters. 4000 attack is very, very strong as well. And if you pair it with the attack boosts or decrease of some of these cards, it is quite hard for your opponent to get rid of it. But then again, spell traps are still a thing, so this card isn't as protected as you'd think. And it's not that easy to get out. Yes, you can send level 12 monsters from your extra deck to the graveyard to summon it with Dogmatikalamity. If you want to be playing it, you can, but I felt like we were already quite high on the ultra rare, so I had to shave this one off. It is what it is. Obviously, if you have it, you can try it out and see if it works for you. We have a White Knight of Dogmatika. Ooh, very loaded name. You can not special summon monsters from your extra deck. This is very, very important. Doesn't really matter because you don't really run that much stuff you can extra deck use, but we have some cards that you can summon. So might sometimes be to your detriment. And note, 500 attack, that's because of its effect. Because if your opponent activates a card or effect, you can send one monster from your extra deck to the graveyard. And if you do, look at your opponent's extra deck and send one monster from it to the graveyard. And then this card gains attack equal to half the combined attack, which can be nice. It's a bit of a gamble then if you summon this card in attack or defense position, because its attack position, its attack points will be reasonably high if you get the effect through. But if your opponent just decides to normal summon monster attack into it, then you obviously have the problem of if they don't activate the effect, you cannot use the effect of this card and cannot use anything else. So a bit problematic from time to time. And this is one of your main playmakers. So usually your opponent sadly does get away with just running into this card. You can play things like Mirror Forces if you want to, but I don't think this is how we should be dealing with this. Then to Nadir Servant, the card that I wish was a Dogmatika card, but for obvious reasons isn't, because that would be very recurable, and then you could do loads of things with this. Can send lots of stuff to the graveyard and searches your stuff. So this card very, very, very good, and it locks you from special summoning monsters from the extra deck, which it should, so that's fine. 2 Dogmatikalamity and 1 of the Macabre. This one can summon it from the graveyard. They all have different kind of effects. This one can use extra deck monsters to summon them. This one can banish stuff from the graveyard to summon your monster from the graveyard as well and from your hand. So these two are very, very important for this deck. Wish I would be able to use 2 of this. It felt a bit better than this in the long run. Like 1 of this and 2 of this felt better ratio-wise, but obviously trying to keep it cheap, and this still works. It's just not as good, but you have ways of getting this back. You have like your incantations, you have some of your other cards, you have this one, you have loads of different things that can recycle. Not loads, but you have some cards that can recycle this card, so at least there's that. Dogmatikamatrix, a card that is decent going first, very good going second. You can add 2 cards to your hand if you go second, and if you go first, you can at least get 1 Dogmatika ritual monster or ritual spell from your deck to your hand. And the second effect is also not bad. First of all, it's a once per turn, not a hard once per turn. So if you have 2 of this, you can actually get rid of 2 extra deck cards. So there is that. If you control a Dogmatika ritual monster, you can look at either player's extra deck and send 1 monster from it to the graveyard. So you can send some of yours to the graveyard if you want to trigger certain effects, or you can have a peek at your opponent's extra deck, see what they're playing, and get rid of certain boss monsters that they might only be running one-offs, like Zeus and whatnot, so that can be helpful as well. Now a card that has a bit of a strange one, but it's very good for a budget deck. We have Chaos Scepter Blast. If you control a level 8 or higher spellcaster type monster, banish 1 card on the field face down. Face down banish that doesn't target? Yes, please. So I feel like this is very nice, and it works very well with your ace monster in this deck, with your ritual monster, because this is a level 8 spellcaster monster. We still have Fleurdelis as well as a level 8 spellcaster monster, and Ashiyan, because they are all this is all the Dogmatika monster spellcasters, so we have that going fast as well. So I feel like at 2 this can't make sense. If you run it at 3, you will have more issues than with other generic cards, because this card is sometimes dead and certain generic cards are less often unusable. So there is always that one. Already talked about this. We have some other cards in here that you can replace with hand traps and whatnot. Just budget stuff that I decided to run. Lost Wind can be very nice considering how bad your attack points of the monsters are, and can also be quite nice for a grind game, because this deck doesn't OTK too well, especially without the Alba Zoa. Then we have Infinite Impermanence. We have triple Dogmatika Punishment. Not sure if I should run 2, but 3 hasn't been too bad lately. But obviously, if you draw 2, you can only activate 1. That can be a bit annoying. And we have 1 Dogmatikaturgy, with how you should be pronouncing this, but I'm not sure if that's what most people would be doing. You can ritual summon 1 Dogmatika ritual monster from your hand or deck by tributing, sadly, Dogmatika monsters and or ritual fusion or synchro monsters from your field, whose total levels exactly equal the level of the ritual monster you ritual summon, which is bad and good from time to time. You can search it with Ecclesia, so it's not too bad, because then if you have Ecclesia on board, you can summon a white relic from your deck, and if you already have a different way, which sometimes happens, of going into White Knight of Dogmatika, this can be a really nice combo. But other than that, it's not all that good. But the good thing with this card is, technically, if you pop it with one of your fossil machines, even if you can't use it, if you drew into it for some reason, then you can use the graveyard effect. You can banish this card, then target 2 Dogmatika monsters with different levels in your graveyard, add 1 of them to your hand, and place the other on the bottom of your deck. So this card is also a card that gets you your ritual monsters back, and gets you a Dogmatika Ecclesia to your hand, or Fleurdelis to your hand, and so on, or back in your deck as well if you want to. So I feel like the second effect makes it worth running still, although this is one of the cards that you could also replace with something else. Let's talk about the cards that are good in your extra deck in your graveyard. We obviously have Elder Entity Intis, because this card can pop any card on the field and destroy it if it's sent to the graveyard. So there's that very, very nice removal, which you can use with the effect of White Knight, obviously during the opponent's turn, to pop some stuff. You'd want to be running 2 or 3 of this in my opinion, but budget-wise we can't. Then we have triple Fossil Machine, because this one can pop 1 spell trap on the field and destroy it if you banish it from the graveyard. So very, very nice card. And the attack stats aren't awful for cards like Punishment as well. And then we have Titaniclad, the card that can add you to your hand or special summon 1 Dogmatika monster or Fallen of Albas if you want to go down that route. Very, very nice. We have 2 Sprint in here, because this can get you into your Springans Kitt. So same effect as the Titaniclad, but different, because we want to be summoning a Springans monster with it. 2 Dragon Master Knight just in here to pop any kind of monster with Dogmatika Punishment. You can run any other one as well, but this has the highest attack, so usually you should be fine. We have 1 Old Entity Haster in here, not because I believe that you can use this card's effect, because this card has to be sent from the field to the monster zone to the graveyard to use its effect. No, I have this card in here because it is a level 4 monster with decent attack stats, so we can use it for Dogmatikalamity if we already used Intis before, if we wanted to go into White Relic of Dogmatika. Usually this is what Herald is for, but since we don't run Herald, we have to run one other card. We have one of this in here because this one can equip itself to a monster special summon from the extra deck, and then when it attacks or is involved in an attack, you can draw one card. Can be somewhat decent, but usually you don't have that many extra deck monsters on board. This variant, but all in all, quite a neat little card. And then we have 2 Xyz that get rid of your opponent's monster stuff. You can obviously run good ones if you want to, but those are the budget ones. If we ever want to go into them, we can. We have 1 Geonator Transverser in here just to have some form of removal in this deck, and then we have Tri-Brigade Rugal in here because if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can make your opponent's monsters lose 300 attack for each monster type you control, which sometimes you control different monster types with the incantations. They're different monster types, so that can happen. Not very good. The other Tri-Brigades are better to be sent to the graveyard. I think Ferrigede then gives you like a mulligan of 1, basically, so that's also a card you could be considering. I think there's like a Synchro monster, the Pegasus one from Adagnister, that you can consider. There's so many cards you can send to the graveyard. Obviously, the Shaddoll package is one of them. If you send Apkalon, then you can add your Schism to your hand. With Schism, then you can go into things like Construct or Winda, depending on what kind of monsters you run. And you can run the whole thing if you want to run both of them. Technically, you could be running some other Shaddoll stuff in here as well if you would really want to, like Ariel, because this card can easily be used to ritual summon, and then the effect still triggers to banish stuff from your opponent's graveyard. So not too bad at all. And another card, one of the new cards as well, is the Dusk Dragon. If you send this to the graveyard, then you can special summon one Dogmatika monster from your deck or Despair monster from your extra deck. So there's that. All in all, not too bad of a card. If you have it, definitely play it in your extra deck. If not, yeah, it is what it is. Sometimes you need to make certain sacrifices. Other than that, cards you can obviously run is go second stuff, like Pancratops and whatnots. This deck isn't too bad going second, so if you splash some hand traps in and some go second stuff, then you can run it because you get lots of advantage out of cards like this. Then you can cut all of these go first cards and maybe even cut Punishment down to 2 or down to 1 and just run go second cards and maybe play the game like that. Can be helpful, can be bad, depends on your hand and what you're playing against. Cards to consider: Prosperity, because lots of the extra deck stuff in here you actually don't need because we don't have all of the good stuff in here, so this could add to your consistency from time to time, and you don't really draw with this deck anyway, so no issues here with that one. Also can put in any good link monsters if you have them, obviously. Let's move on to the rating section. Alright, let's rate this deck, and I want to say, when it comes to power level and strength of this specific list, not Dogmatika in general, this specific list, it is very difficult to say, because this deck can be from like a low 2 out of 5, because your opponent doesn't play any extra deck monster stuff, and so it really doesn't care about what you're doing, to absolute like 4 or 5 out of 5 because you destroy your opponent's extra deck plan instantly, and then they struggle to put on anything relevant to the board. So I would give it like a very, 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 very low 3 out of 5. If you put some adjustments to the list and some additions to the extra deck and whatnot, this deck will be very, very playable. But right now, the way it is, the way this budget version is structured, it has certain issues with consistency, it has certain issues with power play, so very low 3 out of 5, bordering to like a 2 out of 5, but it is what it is. Talking about consistency, I will give this a very low 3 out of 5 as well, mainly because you have so many consistency cards in here. Every card and their uncle searches any other card, so there's plenty of stuff that gets you into your plays, but usually you need, like with most ritual decks, certain cards that go together. So you need the ritual spell, you need the ritual monster, and you cannot be disrupted in your searches, because then this deck produces absolutely nothing. And that's how you sometimes break on, oh, you have too many removal traps now, so many of your go first cards, you have too many of your ritual support but nothing else, and so on and so on and so on. So you can solve this problem somewhat by making additions to it and running different engines for certain things. But yeah, the way it is, it has plenty of good searchers, and it can usually put out what it wants to put out fairly consistently. But it also has some issues, even though it has so many searchers, because you need so many specific different things. So low 3 out of 5, it is what it is. And now talking about budget value, I would give this a very high 3 out of 5. Also, just a 3 out of 5, very consistent when it comes to the rating here, because this deck is quite expensive. Like, it's more expensive than like an average budget deck on my channel, and for the fact that it doesn't do much more than an average budget deck on my channel, you'd say, oh, that's not really good budget value, but the budget value comes from the fact that the Dogmatika engine is quite splashable. Not necessarily the whole ritual engine, but most of the Dogmatika stuff can be used in other control decks, can be used in certain other variants, so it's not too bad. And if you upgrade this deck is still pretty good and pretty playable and can annoy lots of different opponents very, very much to the absolute extreme. So there will always be that. So I feel like a 3 out of 5 is fairly fair. So yeah, take it the way I did it, and yeah, very average deck. Can be fun to play, can be absolute useless. It's a mixed bag. Let's see if I can explain a little bit about Dogmatika. I am not a Dogmatika main by any means, so I will be going off of what I think is a correct play. In the end, might not be, but you can already tell this hand can do some stuff, but it's not the perfect hand either. So let's see what can be done. I decided to go for the Manju first to get that search out of the way, so nothing else comes in difficult here, because we obviously could have had some issues with searching later on with the Ash Dragon if I go for that combo, and I prefer to get this out regardless and then search in the end. So if they disrupt me here, doesn't really matter too much. Plus we can then still go into the Kitt thing, and that can also be quite interesting. Decided to go for the second ritual spell here because there's no way I'm be able to summon both ritual monsters anyway here. So I've decided, yeah, let's just have that for the next turn. If they get rid of this, then I can use this card to summon it from the graveyard. Could have searched anything else here as well. Could have gone for the other ritual monster. Could have gone for the second one of this. Not really a sense. Doesn't make much sense. So we have that one instead. Decided to go for Dogmatikalamity here. Sent the Ash Dragon to the graveyard because we don't need the Springans combo just yet. And then go into the ritual monster hat. Technically, I could have summoned this from the hand, but I didn't want to tuck either of those cards back into the deck. But during the next turn, we now have access to those Springans play. If I would have been able to summon Xyz monsters, then I would have done it possibly. But since this card doesn't allow me to special summon monsters from the extra deck, there was no chance of me using this card on board either. So I wanted to keep this for another turn. What we can do now, though, is summon Ecclesia, and Ecclesia gets what to the hand? Of course, Dogmatika Fleurdelis. So we can get rid of one card of your opponent's extra deck if they use any kind of card effect, pop a monster on board with Ascending Intis, and we have Fleurdelis in case they go into another extra deck monster. So we have some stuff on the board. It's not amazing, but it's also not absolutely terrible. So let's see what we can do from that point onwards. Let's see what they're playing. They are playing a Life Twin, and they're going for the Life Twin combo. I could have popped this card here and just already done certain things. I decided to do that as well because we have Intis, and if they don't have any extenders in hand, then with one monster they cannot be doing all that much, and decided to send Trouble Sunny to the graveyard because they only had one Sunny in their extra deck, and it doesn't really matter if they get rid of this monster now, if they banish it, because I can just summon it back the next turn. And if they still go into one of the extra deck monsters, I still have this card on board, so I can still use Fleurdelis and stop them from doing that as well. So I felt like this was the best play here. Don't really know. I'm not a massive Life Twin player, so I might have just kept this for one of the Link monsters and then popped it if when they use the effect. So that would also have been possible here, I assume. Since they only have one Sunny, we got rid of this, but potentially they might have been able to go into some other kind of Link shenanigans that I would not have been prepared, because there's quite a lot of good Link 2. They set another card. They discarded one of their Kill and now went to the end phase. They could not attack over any of my monsters, obviously, so there's that. And now we can do something else. We have Nadir Servant. Let's speed this up. We have Kitt. Now we go for the Kitt effect. We tuck back the Fleurdelis because we still have ways to search this later on, so there's that, because we can tuck the fusion monster back, so we don't have any issues with this. Now I can use Nadir Servant to search, send more stuff to the graveyard, so we have all of that. We have White Knight on the field now. I decided to go for the second Ecclesia here, because I feel like Ecclesia can search me anything, and I got to send my Fossil Machine to the graveyard, because now I can pop one of that back row here. Decided to use the effect of this card first, because I now just send stuff to the graveyard, and why not? Don't think I would have had any other chance this turn to get to this, and with this I can recur my ritual spell. So if I search the other ritual monster, for example, with the Dogmatika Ecclesia, then I can instantly go into that one as well. I tuck back the Intis so we can pop more stuff. Then I decide to go for some of their back row, and let's see what it is. It is Abomination's Prison. They are playing Life Twin Unchained, which is a fair deck, but obviously if I pop this is bad for me, so they are going into some plays. They're getting this card out. I decide, since they used an effect to get rid of more stuff in the extra deck, that they can't use the Unchained combo as well with the Link monster. I'm pretty sure I sent the Link monster to the graveyard, yeah, because they only run one. Because the extra deck is quite cramped if they want to run all the good stuff. They pop my monster by discarding one card in their hand. They didn't really want to use this, couldn't really use this in their hand anyway, so they bricked a little bit on that, but could get rid of my monster. Then with Intis, I pop the second back row. Could have popped this card, but wouldn't have been that good because it comes back anyway, and I can't finish the duel here regardless, I think, so it doesn't really matter too much. I decide to go for the double search, so we have the ritual monster and have a trap for the next turn, and then I can just go for this. And at this point, I realized I didn't have this level 4 synchro monster in the extra deck yet, so I couldn't leave Ecclesia on board, so this is why I put this in later on, so I have another level 4 monster I could use in exactly these situations. Like this, I had to tribute one of my Ecclesias, which obviously cost me some damage to do to my opponent. Then I bump the attack of this card up to 4,500, very, very neat. So we have that permanently, nice, but this card sadly then only has 500. Should have possibly made this card gain the attack, not sure, but I felt like it was harder to get rid of this one then. So there's that, and gives them more of an incentive to destroy this one with card effects rather than any of the other two. Now I get rid of one of their life twins. They only have 2 of this, so if I get rid of another one with this card's effect at one point, then they cannot go into their life twin place as well anymore. So we have that. They gain some life points because I should have attacked this card first, but didn't. So there's sadly this, but yeah, you can see no matter what I would have put on board, I don't think I could have finished here, but potentially, obviously, if I didn't blow up the spell trap, then I might have been able to, but yeah, it is what it is. Sometimes things don't work out the exact way you want it to work out. They have one card, they said one card, and at this point, does it really matter what we do? Could have just attacked for game, but I don't know what their deck plays. If they play some controlsy kind of stuff, if they play things like Mirror Force, I would be a bit screwed, so I decide to let's go for the fossil thing, but they already use their Evil Twin challenge. Not usually a card that's played that much in the whole Evil Twin matchup, but maybe it's quite good for like grindy decks with the whole Unchained stuff, so you can go into more Link monsters because technically they can then Link summon and whatnot. So potentially that's a good card in that deck. I don't know, I don't think it would be, but it's not awful. At least now they can stall a little bit, we get rid of some stuff, and this should be a game here because there's nothing else they have in hand and nothing in graveyard they can use. I have another replay just to show off what kind of starting board you can also end if you have a bit of a more decent starting hand. So let's move on to that one. And at this point, we can speed it up a little bit. You can already see the hand. There's only a few things we can do. Searching the ritual monster, then searching the ritual spell. Hope we don't get disrupted. We didn't. So at this point, we can do quite a lot of things. We can go into the White Knight, send the Ash Dragon. With the Ash Dragon at the end, we can do some stuff. I decided to get rid of their Sprite Elf because they only had one. If they play in a Sprite deck, then that can be quite problematic. They also had some Drytron cards in here, so I didn't know what to make of that, how you can combine these decks, because I don't think Drytrons have any level 2 monsters, so I don't know what kind of deck they are playing. But they had all the Spite cards in here as well, so I don't know, I thought maybe let's get rid of Elf so they can't do anything with it. Gigantic Spite would obviously also have been a thing, but I thought with Infinite Impermanence I can still stop that quite easily here. And now with Ash Dragon, I just add to my hand Fleurdelis, so we have that for the next turn as well. So we have quite a lot of disruptions, the Scepter Blast, negate, and it's all down the drain. So we're back at where we were before. So we have to play really well here now. They have some Drytron stuff, they have some Drytron combos. They get more field presence and more field presence, go into the Xyz monster, which we can stop here because we have Fleurdelis. And at this point, I thought, why not use the effect of this to pop it? Because then potentially they have one ritual spell in their hand, they have this card on board, and potentially they don't have another monster that could get them into this card here because they need the machine monsters with that attack. And if their other card in hand is not a Drytron monster, then we might get away scot-free here. And let's see how that turned out for us. Sent Entis and also got rid of Zeus then, because I feel like Zeus could be annoying if we don't get to get rid of this card for some reason. but we do, and they end the turn and they surrender because they know this isn't going to get any better from now on. So you can see the deck does some stuff. We even played it through a Lightning Storm, getting rid of like 2 of our disruptions here. And yeah, it's not the perfect deck, but it has some plays. It can be really funny to see how much your opponent stresses out when you get rid of most of their important things in the extra deck. It's quite a nice playstyle. It can be a very destructive playstyle, but I do like this somewhat. And with certain additions, you can make this playstyle be even more annoying. Hope you enjoyed the video. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, I hope you have a nice day.